In 2025, I lost everything I thought I knew about myself. For over 16 years, I was the epitome of the fitness guy. Never missed a workout, meal prepped every week. Discipline for me was just automatic. My identity was built around being the guy who had it all figured out. And then depression hit me like a freight train. For the first time in 16 years, I stopped completely. No training, barely eating. I couldn't even get out of bed some days. I just wasn't myself, and I didn't look like myself either. After months of depression and losing my consistency, I had lost a substantial amount of muscle and put on quite a bit of body fat. And the worst part was I had no idea how to get myself back. All those years of natural discipline meant I'd never actually learned how to rebuild from rock bottom. So months passed. I tried everything: therapy, medication, forcing myself to go to the gym, but nothing stuck. What's ironic is I was a fitness coach who couldn't coach himself out of his own hell. I remember one day like it was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Back when all this hit me, I hadn't gone to the gym in over a month. And my dear patient wife suggested that we go together. She said, look, let's just get to the gym. You don't have to do anything, just get there. And I reluctantly agreed. So we went. My wife jumped into her normal workout. I went over to a barbell and tried placing it on my back. I thought to myself, just do a few sets of squats and see how you feel. And what happened next was soul crushing. Just an empty barbell on my back felt like it was 500 pounds. Not because it was physically heavy, but the mental burden of trying to train were literally crushing me. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't even squat a bar. I just didn't have it in me. And that harrowing moment haunts me to this day. But this was the reality of depression that I never even realized. The basic, simple tasks feel like climbing a mountain. Just the thought of brushing my teeth exhausted me. And unfortunately, if you've never had to battle depression, you'll likely never understand what this feels like, and frankly, consider yourself lucky. So days, weeks, months passed, more muscle lost, more fat gained. The more my mind was crumbling. Now, during this time, my client turned friend, Ian, sent me a pendant that I actually wear to this day. He's the owner of my favorite men's jewelry company, and I coached him for 6 months to lose over 40 pounds of fat, which is pretty cool. On this pendant, there were words that were stamped on it that said, "The man in the arena." Now, I knew these words, but wasn't really familiar with the quote, so I decided to look it up. And it was a quote from Theodore Roosevelt from his speech in 1910. "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do those deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions? Who spends himself in a worthy cause? Who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement? And who at his worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." And this quote touched me and slapped me in the face at the same time. At that moment, I realized I wasn't in the arena anymore. I was in the bleachers, watching others live their lives while I stayed paralyzed in my own head. I needed to get back in the arena. I needed something to fight for again. But how do you get back in the arena when you can barely get yourself dressed in the morning? So I thought to myself, what if I signed up for a bodybuilding competition? Now, if you think that's insane, you're not alone. I thought the same thing. Here I was, skinny fat, no muscle, plenty of fat, depressed, couldn't even maintain basic habits, and I wanted to compete on stage in front of judges? My rational, albeit pessimistic mind was screaming, it's impossible. You're going to be an embarrassment. There's no possible way I could get myself ready for a competition this year. At least not in this mental state. But maybe that's exactly what I needed. Not another small goal, not another get back on track plan. Something so overwhelmingly challenging that it would either break me completely or rebuild me from scratch. So, with delusion and fear, I paid the registration fee. It was time to lock in. So, the process began 7 months to competition day. I treated myself like my own client. I used the systems that I developed over the last 12 years of coaching. And just like a coach to a client, I removed the emotions, the guesswork, and didn't tolerate negotiations on the outcomes. I had a list of non-negotiables, and these were the things that absolutely needed to get done every single day, whether I felt like it or not. Hit my step goal, even if I have to stay up late to do so. Eat all my meals on time, not a single bite off plan. Posing practice every single day, no matter how I felt about how I looked. And then every morning starts with meditation. Now, that one was crucial. So crucial, and I'll explain that in another video if you guys want. The first 2 weeks of this were torture. My body hurt, my mind resisted, everything in me wanted to quit. But something strange happened at week 4. I realized that the suffering had become the point. Not the physique, not the competition, the daily choice to show up even when everything in me said no. Each workout became proof that I was still alive. Each meal became an act of defiance against my depression. I started to find Zen in the process. And as I honed my systems and as my body started to change, so did my mind. I noticed the black cloud of depression wasn't hanging over me anymore. Life had color again. At the hardest points in prep, where I was starving, exhausted, sore, I felt alive. So, show day. The day finally arrived. 7 months of relentless preparation finally came to a head, and I was able to show off the best package that I could bring. And I didn't have any nerves. I wasn't scared. I was completely and totally calm from start to finish. While other competitors were pacing, stressing, worrying, I sat in pure stillness, knowing that I already made it. I already won. I got here. I made it to the end of this journey, even when just 7 months ago, I thought it was impossible. Now, I bet you're wondering, how did you do? Like, what were the results? Well, I won first place in 2 of my categories and qualified for nationals. To say this was a surprise is quite an understatement. I didn't plan for this in my wildest dreams, but while the gold medals are cool, I realized that wasn't the point. The prep was the hardest thing I've ever done. Physically, emotionally, mentally exhausting. But standing on that stage, I realized something profound. The competition didn't save me. The preparation did. It was never about winning or losing. It was about choosing to suffer voluntarily with purpose towards something meaningful. It was about proving to myself that I could still be the man in the arena. And this was the controversial point that I realized, that the suffering is what saved me from depression. You would think the opposite is true, right? Like more suffering would lead to depression. But one of my favorite modern day philosophers said it perfectly. If there is a meaning in life at all, then there must be a meaning in suffering. Suffering is an inescapable part of life. Without suffering and death, human life cannot be complete. Look, we all suffer. It's inevitable. But the beauty of this life is we get to not only choose how we respond to that suffering, we get to choose our suffering. I chose to trade the suffering of meaningless wallowing for suffering trying to aim for a goal. And Dan Coe, one of my favorite guys right now, has said, the most unhappy people are often those without a mission. Give a man something worthy to pursue and watch him transform. Humans are creators. That's how we're built. So of course it makes sense that when we're not building or creating, we fall into sadness or lethargy. We need to struggle. We need a massive goal or purpose to work toward. We need to create meaning for our lives. And that's what bodybuilding did for me. Depression tried to tell me that I was broken. Bodybuilding showed me I simply needed a challenge. Today, I still live like a bodybuilder. Not because I want to compete again. I'm going to, but that's not the point. but because that voluntary refinement gives my life structure and meaning. The daily discipline doesn't even feel like discipline. It's just who I am now. It's my identity. Every morning, I choose the arena. Some days it's in the gym. Some days it's a difficult conversation. Some days it's just getting my morning walk in. But I'm not in the bleachers anymore. I'm not watching life happen to me. I'm making life how I want it. Your arena is waiting. Now, if you're listening to this and you feel stuck, if motivation feels like a foreign concept and discipline feels impossible, you don't need another life hack. You need a project. Something that scares you. Something that demands everything you have. Something so challenging that just showing up becomes an act of defiance against your old self. And look, it doesn't have to be bodybuilding. Hell, it doesn't even need to be fitness related. It could be starting a business, learning a new skill, writing that novel, going on that trip to the other side of the world. The arena is anywhere you choose to face your demons instead of running from them. What's your arena going to be? So thanks so much for listening. If this resonated with you, I'd love to know what arena you're considering. Sometimes we just need someone to tell us that we're not crazy for wanting to do something that scares us. So like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.